Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that likes to shine a light and heat up a number of issues, both locally, provincially, nationally, and right around the world. I'm Robin Adair, and speaking of heat, I think heat's a theme for this week as we've had some real heat now on the West Coast, and we're trying to get used to that. And nothing hotter than my partner in crime down the road, John Jurisic, the Croatian sensation. And John, things are indeed getting much, much warmer.
Oh boy, summer heat has really landed, and in a very dangerous way in so many parts of the world. This is no longer, well, it never was a laughing matter, but it's not something that we just idly talk about. The weather, it's impacting us in such a tremendous way. It's been so hot lately after very dry, but reasonably coolish few months. At least it hasn't been smoky so far, which is great. Up island, yes. But locally, our skies have been pretty clear, which is a bit of a difference from the last couple of summers. But you only have to look north, east, south, and west, boom, around the globe, and see lots of red, hot skies and destruction. Not just heat, it's destructing and hurting people. Even in balmy Hawaii, such a holiday paradise, it's gone from a land of priority, tourism priority, to a land of destruction, Robin.
And there was driving bushfires on all of the Hawaiian Islands, and they were all red for a while. And the worst by far, everybody has to agree on this, was Maui and Lahaina, the city of Lahaina, a beautiful place. I've been to Lahaina several times. Hard to believe what's happened. Absolutely devastating. And from the air, it seems the whole island was on fire. Historic Lahaina torched with hardly a building left intact, dozens of people killed with a dry summer heat and lots of foliage that isn't native to Hawaii. We just saw Soyuz in the Okanagan barely dodge a terrible fire. It was on the edge of a Soyuz. It didn't destroy that city, but it could have. And I remember what happened up in Lytton and in the central interior. Terrible devastation there. Global warming is really taking hold, and the planet's getting hotter.
Now they're calling it global boiling. It's moved from warming to boiling. Terrible to see this in Hawaii, in California, in places like Lytton, as you just mentioned. Towns burned to the ground. I mean, you can't even make this up in movies, what these places look like. And eventually what we're going to hear people had to do to escape from these fires. We've got to move faster off of burning of coal and other fossil fuels. Climate boiling is here. Like so many other issues, are we going to actually do something about it? And you know what? A huge sort of impetus. We need more technologies that will lead us out of this mess, Robin. We'll be presenting a program on new tech that reduces our carbon footprint in the weeks ahead. But let's shift to other things for now.
Absolutely, John. Let's talk about that new blue ribbon panel that's been announced that's going to look again at homelessness and addiction and mental illness and the tent cities that have been a real problem on our streets, and of course all the camping going on in parks as well. Victoria Mayor Marianne Alto leads the panel, which includes members of the business community, various social aid groups and agencies, First Nations, Victoria first responders, including the police chief, Del Manick. And they've laid out some initial objectives like housing, special services, putting an end to criminal behavior. Is it enough?
All worthy objectives. And we, of course, wish this panel well. But yet again, unless the province is going to open significant programs for addicts and the mentally ill, and the feds get really serious about putting bad guys in jail, you have to wonder about if it's all going to turn into a positive outcome. Okay, so our viewers have been chiming in as well, and we received this note from our viewer, Kelly, who writes, "You cannot say new solutions. New solutions give credence to what the politicos have done, suggesting that what's been done to date is successful. I wonder how many of these career social service providers are genuine in their desire for dramatic change on this issue.
It's a legitimate point. I know a lot of people are frustrated. I would include a lot of people that are in those social agencies. We've had a lot of money spent on new housing, and yet the tent cities seem to just keep growing. Meantime, we haven't seen a lot of money placed on lockdown assessment of people with mental illness and drug addiction. And until we're prepared to do that, how do we fix this problem? And as I say, a lot of people in the social agencies join us in being very frustrated by the situation. We need the provincial government and the federal government to step up and get directly involved in a big way. Hard to be optimistic, John. And with that, let's move to healthcare, another area that's sort of it's struggling.
Struggling is right. It's broken. We've been really inspired with physicians and advocates, and lately comments from Dr. Jennifer Lush just last week, as she talked about the dire need for doctors. And we also mentioned the advocacy group BC Healthcare Matters, led by Camille Curry, somebody we've had on the show many times in the past, that I've been involved with in helping on the legislature, and hope they would start to beat their drum more loudly on this issue. And now Camille Curry has spoken regarding the shortage of doctors in emergency rooms. It's been reported that patients were told in the Nanaimo emergency room that there was no doctor available. Can you imagine? Camille Curry of BC Healthcare Matters had this to say: people will die because of this. It's a definition of insanity to keep doing the same failing thing over and over, expecting a different result. This is a government and health authority failure, Robin. Will they ever be held accountable?
It's true, John. And one of the other big points of concern in Nanaimo and around the province was that if you had a heart attack or you got into serious difficulty with your heart, they don't have the facilities in Nanaimo right now to fully deal with this thing. They'd have to fly you down in an emergency to Vancouver or to Victoria. And it's just not good enough. As our province gets bigger and bigger and there's more and more people living in these smaller cities, they need services. It's a real problem. And BC Healthcare Matters has stepped forward. Thank you very much for that. And with that, let's now move to, I think, a better news story, John. Actually, something that's fairly positive right now, particularly in our region, and that is high technology.
Absolutely. It sure is, Robin. I've had all kinds of people comment about my physical activities on the show. And of course, they come and they arise because I'm so frustrated with the lack of progress on so many issues. I'm just so angry at what's left to say. However, don't have to do that about high tech on the island, especially southern Vancouver Island. It's become a major economic engine, and it just keeps growing. Oh, there you go. The arms are moving, Robin. Joining us now to talk about this exciting industry is the CEO of VIATEC, Dan Gunn. Let's zoom him in. And now, joining us in the Rumble Room for the first time is Dan Gunn, the Executive Director and CEO of VIATEC.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Dan. Great to have you. You and I go back a while. I've been involved with tech for some time, but we'd like to talk about what's happening now, what's happening post-COVID. What's the atmosphere now in the advanced tech and innovation sector in this post-COVID environment? How rapidly is advanced tech growing on the South Island? Does advanced technology continue to lead the economic generator and local employer pack, larger in scope and size than tourism and government?
Okay, well, you started with post-COVID, and I would say that I don't really hear that term anymore, post-COVID, right? So it's not that COVID didn't have an impact, it's that that's largely been absorbed, whatever it might have been, right? And so one of the things we saw during the pandemic that I think was unexpected by most was that the tech sector continued to thrive and grow. And so, I mean, one of the obvious reasons for that is to move remotely, especially if you're in a digital and software space, is not all that complicated. And if you're a technology savvy company and you're utilizing the most advanced tools, then you're pretty much prepared, right? And so it was literally, I remember the day around here, and we're not even a tech company, we just work with them. And I just remember everybody close your laptop, pick it up, go home. meet me on Zoom, meet me on Slack. We'll figure this out from there. And so things rolled on fairly as usual. Of course, there were exceptions, right? There's going to be exceptions like Flightographer or Checkfront, right? People who are working close to tourism. But they managed to adapt quite well themselves. I think really more what we're dealing with in tech right now is that in 2021 and part of 2022, there was so much available investment capital that things got a little wonky. Valuations got very high, cash came in fast, and there's now a course correction taking place. And that means some companies got used to a burn rate that isn't sustainable anymore. That means that some companies are stuck, looking for the next round of funding and considering whether it's bridge or down round and things like that. And so those are consequential. But if you only look at that part of the roller coaster, you forget about this part that came right before it. And so I would say we're still net way above where we were 5 years ago, even probably 3 years ago. Tech is still a multi-billion-dollar industry. We would like to get a new economic impact study done, but we haven't got recent numbers. But so we know it's well over 4 billion in revenues, 5 billion in economic impact, about 17,000 employees, which doesn't make it the largest employer. Sometimes people say that, it maybe has the most revenue, but it doesn't have the most people, right? You got to figure like governments are big, academia is big, tourism's big. There's a lot of bodies involved in that, right? And so tech brings in a lot of outside revenue. And so just for your viewers' knowledge, when you're a tech industry on an island in Canada, you're not selling a lot here. Very few of our companies set up to sell anything in Victoria. And so they're bringing in revenue from all around the world. 85% of the revenue comes from off the island. 60% of that comes from the United States. And so it just gives you 60% of the total comes from the United States, not just 60% of the 85%, 60% of the total. And so those dollars get picked up, brought in here, and then they get spent here multiple times. And so according to Ivy League school X, I can't remember if it was Stanford or Harvard, every tech job creates about 4 or 5 other jobs within a community, because they're usually well-paying jobs that spend money on having a good time and buying services and things within that community. And so tech continues to play that role here locally, and I can't imagine it will ever stop.
It's interesting, Dan, and welcome to the Rumble Room. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about my own history around tech, which I think started in the 90s when the tech park was opening. And Andrew Petter was the MLA in Saanich South, and he was also a minister. And I don't know if he was the one who actually termed the phrase, but the phrase came out about Silicon Valley North. That's what they wanted Vancouver Island to be. And I'm curious to hear if you think that's been achieved, but also I guess another thing I'd be interested in knowing about is how the supply chain issue has affected your industry. We keep hearing about you can't get your car that you've ordered because they don't have all the high-tech applications for the car because it's stuck somewhere in Taipei or it's stuck somewhere in Tokyo, and there's a slowing down on ordering a lot of high-tech product that is actually manufactured in Asia. Is this having an effect on your industry, or is this something you can work around?
Okay, so question one, Silicon Valley North. I take umbrage with anybody who tries to put Silicon Valley anything. Let me be nice. Silicon Valley has achieved a great deal. It is not what Victoria has ever aspired or wanted to be. It has its own character. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. And we're doing something that's a lot more community driven, that's a lot more long term, that's more what we call micro niche global. So it's not like we're building Google here. We're building, but we are building Redland, which Canon bought for $400 million, right? But I think the character traits of the principles of Silicon Valley, they have a downside. And we're fortunate not to be a part of that. And so that's why I think it was 2008 or 9, we came up with the term Techtoria. We wanted to make it clear that there should be a moniker for our city, that it's an innovative entrepreneurial region. But we wanted to distance it from anything else that already existed, because it is very unique. We have 2 universities and a college. We have many federal research facilities. We have arguably one of the best lifestyles in the world. It's beautiful here. It's livable here. And so those things are all very special, and it deserves its own name as opposed to a knockoff version of a marquee name. The second part about the supply chain, there was impact, but not at the same level, right? So it's a matter of scale. And so what people had to get very good at in Victoria was managing their supply chain, which included, getting in more orders early to have the parts you were going to need down the road, and being very clever about that. What's special about our tech community is that there's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of support. So very few people sell anything here. So it's not like everybody's set up here to sell to the military. It's not like everybody's set up here to sell to the finance district in New York. So they're a very wide variety of types of companies. And their willingness to share, because they're not really competing for customers, is higher than I've seen in most other places. They are competing for people, of course. And so that can make things a little different. But they started to share with each other. This is how I'm getting around that, or this is how I'm dealing with that, or just getting together and talking about it. And so there was an impact, but I don't think it was sizable. It was inconvenient.
There's hundreds of success stories within VIATEC under your leadership. Comment, please, on some more recent ones. I understand ER Games, I think that's it, EA Games has decided to set up. So review some of the rising stars in the tech sector now.
Sure. Well, geez, I get asked this a lot, and it is hard because you don't want to leave anybody out.
Right.
And so people are getting a lot of news lately, and I'll try and do a sort of a wide variety of examples. And so I mentioned Redland recently. That is one of our largest acquisitions ever at $400 million, right? Purchased by Canon, one of those 20-year overnight successes. So they figured out a way to grow the crystals required in the microchips and semiconductors that go in bomb detectors, MRI machines, et cetera. And they came up with a better crystal that gives better results. And they had to continue to refine that process and grow those crystals right here on the Saanich Peninsula, and then find customer sets and then find proof, and they did it. And so I love that story because they employ hundreds of people now. But they started with this very hard science idea. It wasn't like a simple digital product. It wasn't an app, right? They were like, we're going to figure out how to grow a thing that's never been grown effectively before. And so kudos to them for that. A very common story you hear lately is related to Certain. Certain has taken on the background check business globally. They started out, as a small group of founders, and now I'm not sure what their headcount is, but I wouldn't be surprised if you told me it crested 150, closing in on 200 people. They've raised a lot of investment interest. They've been bringing in some of the bigger investment rounds we've ever seen in our community, and they're continuing to grow and thrive. So even though I talked about how money has dried up a little bit, they're still thriving and carrying on. Another example I really like is this one. I can tie to VIATEC a little bit. I don't really like VIATEC taking credit for all this hard work that entrepreneurs do. Like, we're here to support them. We're here to enable them. And sure, we probably are. We definitely are helping along the way. But the hard work is on them. And but this story is a good one in that they like to give us credit. And so there's a company called Barnacle, and they make these marine tracking systems. And so Brandon, who started that company, was thinking about it. He worked for another tech company here in town. He's he has a military background, but he's also a smart technologist. And he had this concept, and it was participating in our accelerator program that convinced him to quit his job and actually go for it and start this company, which was his 6-year anniversary was just last week from getting that started. He was just so we own Fort Chectoria downtown at 777 Fort Street. It's a co-working building with 4 floors. We have at any given time 20 to 30 startup companies with very affordable, flexible space that we can offer them. He started on the ground floor in the cafe, just using the Wi-Fi. So we have a cafe downstairs and a meeting space, and he started building that, working with that. But now he's employing many people. He's the government loves making announcements with Barnacle. And so he's in the news all the time, as is the rest of his team. And they're a good group of people that, from concept to, like large sales success, right here in Victoria. So those are some good examples off the top of the head that kind of span the gamut.
I wanted to ask you about housing, because housing seems to be the issue du jour across the board, keeping talented people working here close to home. A lot of people are well paid in your particular sector and maybe can afford more real estate than an average worker in the city. However, they could work and do the kind of work they're doing right now in other places where perhaps it's not as expensive to live. Is this a challenge? Is the high price of housing, the lack of affordable housing, particularly on the South Island, something that your members are mindful of, and is it affecting keeping people closer to home?
Well, there's two parts to that. So short answer, yes. Longer answer. Not only is housing inventory and the basic economics of scarcity, supply, and demand in play here, but also remote work has become a lot more standard and a lot more accepted. And so now people who live here can work for companies anywhere, and people who live anywhere can work for companies here. And we're seeing more and more of that, right? So the globalization of the workforce working for Victoria companies. What's that mean long term? It means that there, some of maybe the entry level and medium level jobs may not be located in Victoria because of affordability or availability, right? And so I get asked more often than I'm comfortable with by policymakers and politicians, what can we do for tech? And I'm like, what can you do for everybody? It's like, it's not like we have something special. We need housing availability, housing affordability. We need good transportation. People have to feel safe. People have to be proud of the community that they're in. They have to have cultural things that they want to do. And so it's not like tech has a unique personality in that way. I think often what well-meaning policymakers are trying to do is like, is there any kind of policy that we can do that would, encourage tech more? And I'm like, not more than making it livable here. Let's be honest. At the end of the day, like I said, I don't want VIATEC to get too much credit. The people who make a tech sector work are the people who quit their jobs and jump off that cliff and start building an airplane in the air to build a company and create jobs. And so they're the ones that really are making the big difference. But what they need is the right infrastructure in place, right? And so I like to talk about Victoria being a magnetic city. And I define that based on, I've been talking about this for a long time, and that term is taking off quite a lot in other cities as well. But a gravity city, let's pick Silicon Valley, let's pick San Francisco. If you have so much critical mass, you pull everything in, good and bad, everything. People, opportunistic people, nomadic people really bright people that are struggling. Everything gets sucked in. It's not very discerning. Whereas a magnetic city, people are choosing it. It may not have the critical mass of a mega metropolis, but it has the lifestyle and the quality of life and the quality of opportunity that they're looking for. Now, affordability is part of that, right? I'd love to live, in some parts of Hawaii, but it's just not in the cards, right? I don't have those economic means to have the same life I have here there, and I think we need to take that into account. And so, you said earlier that people in the tech sector make more, and so maybe it doesn't impact them as much. I understand that line of thinking, but really, it's housing availability. If there's nothing at the top tier, they'll take the middle tier. If there's nothing in the middle tier, they'll take whatever tier is available. And then you get that drive up in price, right? And so then it becomes unaffordable for the service sector or other roles. And so it's problematic. And I'm not an urban planner, and I don't want to be one. And so I don't know what the answer is. But whenever I'm asked, I'm like, more available, affordable housing, I think would be good. Now, I've been to lots of places around the world that have a very innovative economy. And we have to watch them for the cautionary tale as well. Like if you look at Austin 15 years ago, it was a remarkable opportunity. It was affordable. It was cool. There was good tech companies there. It's a university town. It's the seat of the state legislature. Sound familiar, right? Like a lot of the same things that we have. And they grew bananas fast, but they didn't grow infrastructure, right? So people now live further out of town, getting into town on the same highways. It's a disaster. Right. So like what Austin used to be was special, and now it's got its own growing pains. I'm sure they're working on it. There are a lot of really bright people and good people in Austin. But it was, when I saw that happen, I was like, okay, yes, we need more housing and we need the infrastructure that goes with that. And again, I'm not an urban planner, but I hope people are paying attention to where those growing pains are happening. Because listen, going back to a magnetic city, we should be the number one place people want to live in Canada, right? We should be. I'll take the Pepsi challenge with any other town or any other city in the country. But right now, counter to the idea of affordability, places like Hamilton and Aurora are more expensive than here. I don't even know what's happening in Ontario. I can't I come from there, and I cannot even imagine a circumstance where living there versus here was equal or more expensive there. And so this isn't necessarily a Victoria problem, but it needs a Victoria solution.
So aligning with the housing issue, already mentioned several times during our conversation, is this notion of employees now working from home, especially since the pandemic hit a few years ago. Many tech companies are encouraging, I think, many companies, period, are encouraging their employees to work from home, at least for now. Quite a debate about this. About do you see these type of satellite operations continuing to operate, considering the social impact, the video impact, the Zoom impact? What are your thoughts on this a little deeper than what we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I think one of the issues, because this conversation is happening all the time, but one of the issues is people try and generalize, and it's not that general, right? So it depends on your customers. It depends on how big your team is. It depends on the personality and the responsibility, the self-motivation of your team members. It depends on what model you had before. It depends on where you're located. It depends on where your customer's located, et cetera, right? And so there are some companies that have gone 100% virtual, and they're generally in the 10 to 20 range. And they think they're going to stay that way in perpetuity. I believe that's probably true because employees like it. And so I don't know how you put, that's a Pandora's box that's wide open. And I don't know how you change that. I think it can be done well. I don't think it's simple. And I think it really depends on what they're asked to produce, right? Because, what type of oversight do you have on the level of productivity? Things like that. It's more difficult online, so you have to have more tools. Me personally, as a leader and a manager, I would be terrible in that environment because I need to talk to people. I need to overhear a conversation and jump up and be like, "Hey, let me give you a little bit more context on that." But there are others that are, more organized and process oriented than I am, and they're thriving with it. So I don't think there's one answer to that. I think it's and also, what's your competition doing? Right? Does your competition have a competitive advantage on you because they're remote or because they're in office? And if they do, can you outmaneuver that? Can you overcome that? So it's not that general. I think really, if you want to peel that onion a little further, though, when that money was widely available in 2021, for example, and there was pandemic support available for the world, and so people were choosing whether or not they wanted to work or if they wanted to keep doing the same thing. I think a lot of that was healthy. I think a lot of it was hard for business, but I think a lot of that is healthy, right? Let's reconsider what we're doing and why. And there's still ramifications from that. People are still different in how they prioritize things now. But when that money was highly available and there was all this flexibility, I would say that the level of influence and control swung more to the worker than to the employer.
Always good to hear from Dan Gunn, and a big thumbs up to everyone involved in the high-tech sector. It's a growth industry, and we are so appreciative that those good jobs are staying on the island. Maybe not right in Victoria, because people can live wherever they want, but the island is greatly benefiting, and we want to give that a big salute. And we also want to salute someone who is a great artist in North America, but hails from Canada and has just passed away in the last couple of weeks, and that is Robbie Robertson. And he died at the age of 80, an officer of the Order of Canada, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with his group, The Band. He wrote such great hits as The Wait, Up on Cripple Creek, and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Robbie Robertson, a real legend, and sad to see him go.
Loved The Band, with Robertson and Gordon Lightfoot passing on. There are just too many of these extraordinary legends that are succumbing to age and illness. Yet, on the other hand, there are many that are still performing, which is extraordinary. Time passes too quickly. Their songs, however, live with us forever.
And on that note, John, speaking of living on forever, this show is going to go on and on and on, but not today. This is the wrap up. Time to say goodbye and thank all of our viewers for their support and how they can follow the Rumble Room.
Robin, this is so fun. Thank you. I never thank you enough for the Rumble Room and all of the fun we have and all the information that I learn about every single week. And yet again, this week is a fabulous show. And we want to hope that all of the folks appreciate how to follow us, how to join in on the fun. how to join in on the exercise movement that we are creating on the VRR. There are actually 8 ways you can do that. There is YouTube and YouTube Shorts. We're now shortening our clips to fit into these exploding platforms. YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels. Of course, where mothership is Facebook. We're on X, Y, and Z. Oh, sorry, those don't exist yet. X, formerly called Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and on numerous Facebook news groups. Subscribe, join all of those 8 different platforms. Lots of views. People watching stuff from all over the place and from the benefits of their phone, their computer, their home, all friends of the Victoria Rumble Room. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm John Jurassic.
And I'm Robin Adair. And in the words of Virgil Caine, who was on the Danville train the night they drove old Dixie down, rumble on.